video that deals with Plato's cavern allegory, where enslaved men who may be sitting on these very seats in a cave like this are injected, or given, better said, a vision of the world in which they will be trapped and which they will never be able to escape. Now then, if one of these men comes out of the cave and sees reality and daylight, shows him a different reality, and sees that this may help him put an end to the slavery of his cave pals, this man will attempt to go back to the cave and tell his former enslavery colleagues what the right path is. The interesting thing about this video is to see how the companions react. They won't believe him, they will go after him, and they will end up killing him and crucifying him. This is the cave allegory that brings images from Matrix, and which is very appropriate for this talk, because what brings us here together is a taxation system to achieve it, as if a taxation system to have a free men's society, an egalitarian society, were something new. Precisely what I want to prove through this presentation is that this is absolutely old. It is the very first regime that ever existed in mankind's history. That is, man in natural state, as Thomas Hobbes says. Men in this natural state don't kill each other, they coexist, they cohabit, they cooperate, and any society that
poder sustentar un sistema jurídico jerárquico, o lo que Fred Harrison llamará la cultura predadora, ¿no? Entonces, lógicamente, al desplazar este conocimiento de nuestros ambientes académicos, lo que tenemos es una sociedad terriblemente desigual. Entonces, ¿podés pasar a la segunda? De esa desigualdad surge esta situación.
These situations portrayed here on the picture are commonplace in Latin America and result from that. This is, for example, the Morumbi borough in Sao Paulo. If we were to have a look of Rio de Janeiro, that wonderful city, paradise on earth, we'll see a coastline with buildings like those that you can see on screen. It's a true beauty, but behind the hills, there are 900 slums or favelas with a 50-kilometer diameter. That's the extent of inequality and conflict present in Brazil today. And it's the same type of conflict we have here in Argentina. I live in La Plata, and as I drive to Buenos Aires, I drive past a private estate and a slum, then another gated community, and then another slum. That's unavoidable. Of course, inequality is the mother of all forms of violence. That's why Fred Harrison's talk was ideal to me yesterday, in the sense that I agree that these situations bring about civil war. And the only way to bring civil war to stop is through a war amongst nations. That's why this possibility of the Third World War being so close. The only way states have to bring civil war to an end, or bring self-destruction to an end, is by entering into conflict with a neighboring country. These are the consequences. What is that? Well, that's it might be a picture from Sao Paulo, or it might be a picture from Rio de Janeiro. It might well be, or it might be Los Angeles, as we recall from 2 years ago, or in the outskirts of Paris. However, this picture was taken a couple of months ago in London. So no one is alien to this situation, even if there are no slums in London or Paris. The path to hell and the fact that we are transforming paradise into hell may take place through the body of rules and legislation implemented in society. Notice that back in the year 400, St. Augustine said, history is essentially, made speaking, a constant struggle between two cities, two legal systems. One that leads to the city of God, that is that social arrangement which results in brotherhood, equality, and freedom, and the other, the devil's city, or civitas diaboli, the society that is scourged by slavery, inequality, and civil war. These events have been often discussed in the history of mankind. I mean, why moving from a proper to an improper legal system? Well, it took place in the time of the Egyptians, of the Greeks, the Romans, and once again in the 19th century. I would like to mention now Carl von Savigny, who in his writing The Vocation of Our Century Towards Legislation and Case Law, written back in the 19th century, mind you, I mean, he did not witness the 20th century, and I wrote the date there to show that back in 1853 lots of things happened. Carl von Savigny says in his writing, a code, and mind you, the word code, I mean gene code and evolution come from moral sciences. They are precisely used by Darwin to explain biological processes. And unfortunately, Darwin not only took them from Scottish moral experts, but took them for him forever. Notice what happened, or what a code was for these Scottish thinkers. A code should not contain but for the principles that give rise to the decisions of the different fields of expertise, because the science of law, like geometry, supersedes and is based on foundational principles. Had Savigny not said this in 1850-something, but in 1950, he would have said, because the science of law, like the biological science, instead of geometry, is based on genes that gave rise to the evolution of different subsystems, cultural, economic, etc. This was clearly and thoroughly developed by biology, since in each and every of our millions of cells we have the same chromosome, a same chromosome which is replicated in each and every of our cells, and in turn each of our and every of our cells will play different roles and have different functions. That's there is a foundational and principle which will generate different things in our body, in our biology, but which played the same role in the body of rules. Who interprets this very well is Juan Bautista Alberdi, the writer of our Constitution, who said that in the Declaration of Rights, in the Argentine Constitution, Alberdi lists those 6 genes in the Declaration of Rights. In Article 14 to 20 of the Constitution, he refers to those genes that will give rise to the different bodies of rules at a cultural, political, social, and economic level. He says the Declaration of Rights should be a fortress that cannot be penetrated. Notice that for the Declaration of Rights, he's asking the same as the cell does for the chromosome. There is a core and a nuclear membrane protecting the core from any alteration. This is what Alberdi is asking for in connection with the Declaration of Rights. To avoid, he says, that men in the name of the state may attack other men. He says In Article 14, that is the right to work and make use and dispose of the fruits of that work, I have put an iron paddock to the advances of socialism. That's what he lived back in the 1850s. Had he lived later, he would have said the advances of socialism and capitalism. I mean, it is necessary to get away from that in order to punish the freedom of men through taxation. This is very important. He then goes on to say, I asked the politicians of the future to maintain this DNA of civilization unaltered in furtherance of peace and progress. For this to work at a biology level, it has to be integrated with Article 28, the principle of non-contradiction, whereby each piece of law that is passed should be replicated on those 6 articles on that genetic DNA, so that no law that is passed may contradict these principles. That role would be monitored through the legal control of constitutionality or constitutional control. And judicial review. He says, law became as attractive to me as the most interesting phenomena in nature. He noticed some similarities between natural law and he noticed that whatever he had studied in the code took him away from that. So everything had to be subject to research, to progressing using the same scientific method used by biological sciences today. He did not witness the development of this method, and it's true that social sciences have tried to imitate this, but the result has been extraordinarily scarce, not to say negligible. The downside of this, and based on the Napoleon Code, he says codes have become some kind of legal government program whereby the state repeals everything that is not included there. That is, we are moving from the situation where there was the rule of law, which regulated the actions of men so that they would not attack other men in the name of the state. That is, the rule of law. Law was above governors and rulers, to this situation which provides for the ruling of legislation. That is, decisions that the rulers have to be observed and supersede the law. After the law, the law may say what the ruler says at any given time. So we see here a significant shift, and the result is predictable. And Juan Bautista Alberdi would predict this later on when he criticized the Argentine Civil Code, saying that it was a counter-revolution to the principles of the May or the French Revolution. That is, going back to the barbarian law of the Romans. Let's see now what happened with that principle which should govern the economy. We see that the origin of states in all primitive societies, including in any kind of society, a club, a gated community, whatever society you may think of, people will contribute as a function of the area being used.